and let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the Parsippany Library. We have a really interesting program, How to Write Dialogue, by Charlie Levin. He has asked that if you have any questions, you can certainly unmute yourself and ask them. Will be rather more interactive than a program that you're just going to sit and watch and Q&A at the end, unless, of course, you can think of your questions at the end. So, Mr. Levin, welcome and take it away.
Okay, I'm going to do a little screen share here, and you can let me know if you're seeing it. And you all see my opening slide here? Okay, well, how many of you are, just so I know, are writers or aspiring writers? Can you raise a hand, shake a hand? Good. Okay, we got the right group. And this is kind of a very specific topic that writers would be more interested in than readers, although I think as readers, we're fascinated by dialogue too. So, and as I was saying before, some of you got on, Neil and I, who's down there on my left on my screen, he and I are in a writers group together, and Neil is a writer too. And I always admire Neil's beautiful descriptions, and he picks on me for not having too much dialogue and not enough description. And I'm really obsessed with dialogue, and maybe it's because I'm a movie fan, and I just like dialogue does it for me, sings for me. So this is a fun topic for me. And so who am I? I've written 3 books, published 3 books so far: Not So Dead, Not So Gone, Not So Done. And I'm a voracious reader, lover of thrillers, movies, TV, massive media consumer. I'm sure most of us are, especially during the pandemic. If we have time later, I'd love to know what your favorite Netflix series is or what you do, but because I'm always looking for recommendations. And I kind of grew up on TV. I had a single working mother, and I was alone a lot as a kid. And so stories were so important to me. And in those days, kind of like the internet is now, they say, you know, the kids consume too much of it. They used to worry about kids watching too much TV, if you remember that. And that I finally felt relieved of that guilt when one of my author mentors, David Morrell, who was the guy who actually created Rambo, the character Rambo, said to me, "You can never watch too much TV." And I thought, great, okay, it's fine with me. I also have a consulting company. I've been doing website development things for 25 years, and we're still actively doing that. And I happen to be a championship poker player. I've played tournaments all over the country and the World Series of Poker, and that's a whole other subject, but it influences some of my thinking for sure. And my Not So Dead, a few points, hit #1 for thrillers on the Amazon bestseller list. So that was kind of exciting. So let's talk about the anatomy of dialogue. I'll tell you what I'm going to cover today, and then, as I said, I'm going to ask you some questions too. But what I want to cover, my first goal is, what's the point of dialogue? What are we trying to do when we write dialogue? One of my favorite little subtopics is about subtext, which is when your character is saying one thing but maybe means something else, or there's a lot behind what maybe she's saying. And we'll go through some examples of this. Tagging, which is a technical thing about he said, she said, what good tagging is and what bad tagging is. And testing, how do you know it sizzles? How do you know it's authentic? How do you make sure? Everybody interested in those items? Yeah, we're good? Okay. And we'll go through some examples, and I think you'll be able to hear audio because I have one audio example too. So what does dialogue do? I just like my little frog up there. That's all. Neil has his cars in the background. I have little funky figures in my background. I would argue that the number one thing that dialogue does is express conflict. Now, you have to think about this a little bit. Conflict is probably what engages us the most in stories. And one of my favorite books on writing is Save the Cat. I highly recommend it. It's actually a book on screenwriting, but it really applies. And it goes through the beats and stories and those kinds of things. But what Blake Snyder, the author, contends is if you write a scene that has no conflict in it, cut the scene. There should be conflict in every scene in a story. And I'm talking about fiction primarily. It's not in nonfiction. Hopefully you don't have too much conflict. Who knows where the line comes for you can't handle the truth? Yeah, Renee, where? Unmute.
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men, right.
Great movie.
And it's a great scene charged with conflict, right?
Very.
And also one of my favorite writers is Aaron Sorkin. Are you all familiar with Aaron Sorkin? And if you just want to study dialogue, watch The West Wing, A Few Good Men, Studio 60, which most people haven't seen, but you can get it. And it's kind of a parody of SNL, and it's a terrific unsung series. You also wrote Social Network and Molly's Game, and recently the Chicago 7. And he's all about dialogue. He also writes his dialogue in iambic pentameter, which a lot of people don't realize. He's very much into how it sounds, which is a good test of dialogue too, good dialogue. So we'll come back to this conflict thing. The other thing it does is it gives you some idea of the personality of the character. I mean, in our writing group, I'm reading Neil's story, and he's very much expresses personality in his dialogue. So if you read the line, "Why, gee whiz, Dad," what does that tell you about the character? How old is the character?
Well, I would say he's a teenager.
Right. Okay. And what's his or her attitude?
It sounds almost like they're embarrassed. Like, oh, gee whiz,
right.
Dad.
Gosh. Teenagers are great at rolling their eyes. It's like a rolling their eyes moment, right?
Yeah. I agree.
So it's 4 words of dialogue, and it tells you a whole lot about personality. More so than say, well, he's a teenager who's rolling his eyes because he thinks his dad is out of tune. There's interior dialogue, which you don't want to overuse, but I think is really important. The character talking to themselves. Example I gave, just as what a dumb jerk I was to fall for him. Now, that's 8 words. What's the story behind the 8 words? What does it tell you? Anybody? Who's talking? Somebody in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And what kind of shape is this relationship in? Not good.
Maybe bad.
It's either over or it's going to be over, right? And how does the speaker feel about themselves?
Poorly.
Yeah, she feels terrible, but in another moment, she'll realize that he was really the jerk and she'll feel better.
There you go. You're writing the next line of the dialogue. All right, good. So there's so much in so few words that you can really do. Also, if you write, like Neil and I write thrillers, it's good to have a break, comic relief, and the tension. This example was the mom says, "Jimmy, am I a bad mom?" And Jimmy says, "Mom, my name is Jack." It's just funny. It's cute. Dad humor, I guess. But it can inject humor. Exposition or backstory. I just summarized this with blah, blah, blah. You don't want to do too much of this, right, Dee? You don't want to, no, you don't want to do a whole lot of explaining, although sometimes you can't avoid it. One trick I've used in writing is that in my first book, I really had to have one of the main characters explain some of the science behind what was going on, and he wrote, and so it was a decent sized paragraph of this explanation that I just had to do. So the way I handled that was at the end, another character, Bart, says, "Boring." And it's like, okay, as the author, I'm acknowledging that might have been boring. I'm willing to say that, but now you know what you had to know. So there are ways to deal with that, but you don't want to do too much of that. And also backstory, it's really a mistake to do a lot of backstory early in a book. Turns people off. You're better off dribbling it out through the narrative. And subtext. Here's an example. "We should get married again." Whoa, 5 amazing words. Tell me what the story is behind that. What do you see when you hear that?
Well, I just revert back to the dumb jerk. He clearly realized that he was an idiot, apologized to her profusely, and he decided they should get married again.
Right. So we now know there's 2 people in a relationship. They were married before. They're not married now. They're probably rekindling this relationship. And we don't know what the response is going to be to this, which leads us to want to read more, right? Which is a good thing. You always want to turn the page. So I just love that little line. And what subtext does too is, rather than telling the reader exactly what's going on, you're letting the reader sort of fill in the blanks, imagine the scene. And I think it's a powerful tool where you can tickle the reader's imagination with dialogue. And then I think one of the most important tests, and we'll talk a little later about tests for does dialogue work, is it always has to move the story forward. Otherwise, you have Waiting for Godot on a park bench. It's 2 people talking that doesn't go anywhere, and you'll lose your reader. So something in the dialogue has to say we're moving forward. "We should get married again" is moving things forward, right? So it's always good to go back and check on that. Okay, so I was going to play you a little example of sample dialogue. It's from chapter 43 of my latest book, but it's since I'm into audiobooks, it's narrated by a professional narrator. And I'm going to stop at a couple of points and ask you what you just heard. What is that an example of? So let's click into this here. And By the way, this is my website, charleslevin.com, and there's a lot of free short stories here, and some of them have audio with them. And I recommend you check it out. So, like on this story, Loverly, I felt it could stand alone as a blog post, so I put it up there. And if you can't hear this, let me know, but I think you'll be able to hear it okay.
Chapter 43, Loverly. The gravel driveway is long and winding up to the Riverdale Assisted Living Center in Scarsdale. Rich gets out of his Crown Vic and takes a minute to take in the puffy morning clouds doing their slow dance in the early fall sky. The scent of freshly cut grass lingers in the air. Life is short and bittersweet, he thinks. Scarsdale is one of the most affluent towns in America. Not that it matters in this case. What matters is that it's close to where his sister, Margaret, lives, so she can check on Mom regularly. Rich feels pangs of guilt for visiting so infrequently, but being assigned with DHS to California and then DC has made it harder. Rich's mother, Alice, is in stage 5 of her Alzheimer's journey. Her trip down this path is mostly pleasant, but sometimes scary and confusing. She has good days and bad, according to Samantha, her nurse. There is no earthly light at the end of this road. Hopefully, there is a divine one. Rich checks in with Samantha. How is she today? Today is a good day. She may remember you. Why don't you see if she'll go outside? The morning is cool enough and the fresh air may do her some good. Rich takes Samantha's hand. Thank you for being so kind to her. It's not hard. She's a sweetheart. I miss the way she was, but I'm sure you hear that all the time. Getting older is about adapting, Alzheimer's or not. I understand. It's just a loss, that's all. Yes. And despite the series of losses we suffer from age, there's much left to appreciate and enjoy. Try focusing on that. Samantha gestures towards the hall. She's in her room. I will, Rich says.
Okay, so we know all about Rich's background because that was in the description, but Samantha is the nurse. What kind of personality comes through in that little exchange with Samantha?
She seems caring, but kind of matter of fact.
Yeah. And reassuring to him and, so forth. We don't know much more about her and we don't see her again, but we get a little feeling about it. Okay, so Rich is going to engage with her mother momentarily here, with his mother.
Samantha pivots and saunters towards the reception desk. Rich can't help noticing the gentle sway of her hips. He heads down the hall and knocks gently on the open door to Alice's room. His mother is in a rocking chair, attempting to knit something, which looks like a tangle of knots. She looks up. Rich, you're home from school. How was your day? Rich forces a smile. It was good, Mom. Would you like to go for a walk outside? It's an extra special day. She smiles broadly. Oh, you remembered what I always taught my students, that every day is an extra special day. She turns back to her chaotic knitting. He reaches over to lightly take her arm. She recoils. Don't touch me. You took advantage of me once. Shame on me. You won't do it again. Rich wonders what cruel memory she's reliving. It's me, Mom. Rich, your son. I saw...
I hate to interrupt the flow there because we're into it, but in that little exchange with his mother, what happened there? There was conflict, right? So there's conflict at that point.
Well, they're serving ice cream outside. Would you like some? Her demeanor instantly changes. Ice cream? I love ice cream. Do you think they have chocolate sprinkles? I bet they do. Come, let's go see. She drops her knitting in a nearby garbage can. Let's go. I want vanilla with chocolate sprinkles. She stands, but still slightly stooped, heads for the door. Rich circles behind her as she heads out, retrieves the knitting and puts it on her chair. He hears her from the hallway. Come on, what are you waiting for? He hurries into the hallway, gently guiding Alice downstairs and onto the expansive lawn. There is a good humor truck ringing its bell. Last call. Rich buys 2 ice cream cones, one with sprinkles, and hands it to his mother. They share a bench in a white gazebo on the edge of the woods. The cardinal alights on the railing and chirps a few notes. Rich, what was that song we used to sing when we did the dinner dishes at night? We sang lots of songs, Mom, mostly show tunes. And as if she is a blossom opening up to the sun and not failing at all, she launches into, all I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? And Rich joins in. Lots of chocolate for me to eat. Lots of coal making lots of heat. Warm face, warm hands, warm feet. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Then Alice stops abruptly and seems to shrink back into herself, like a tulip closing at the end of the day. What did you say your name was? Rich's eyes water. Rich, your son, Mom. Oh, Rich, yes. Did that bully pick on you again at school today? Yes, Mom. He did. Remember, bullies are just weaklings in disguise, trying to make up for their small penises. You stand up to him. Show him who's the better man. Rich blushes and smiles for real this time. I'm trying every day, Mom. Good, she says, as a tear runs down her cheek. Because today is an extra special day.
Okay, so in that chapter, what did you hear?
It's a nice, the extremes of the mother's dementia, basically, from being lucid to not knowing who he was, thinking he's someone else. Very touching, her relationship with her son, but only for a brief moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the other sort of tests for dialogue is how does that dialogue make you feel when you hear it?
It reminds me of what happened with my dad in that regard.
You went through that.
Yeah, I didn't see him very often, or not later on in his life, but remember dealing with when he'd, go in and out of lucid moments and then, something totally off the wall or something of the sort, have a grandiose idea or whatever about something
Yeah.
or what have you.
I went through it with my father-in-law, and I've had people who read that chapter and told me how it reflected on their own experience. And then the interesting thing that this is a slight aside, but the narrator did an amazing job reading that, didn't he? And when I review the production of the audiobooks, and I reviewed that chapter, and I said, geez, you just nailed it there. And he said, my mother has Alzheimer's right now, and I think his emotion came through in his reading of that. So it was just kind of serendipitous in an odd way there, but okay, so tagging. That's the he said, she said, and the current sort of general thinking about that is that you just want to keep it simple. He said, she said, if you don't need it, you don't do it at all. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but you don't want to say things like, she said amusingly. You want to kill all the adverbs. The thing I heard most recently was that if you're using adverbs, it means you don't have the right verb. And I thought that was fairly appropriate. However, to a limited extent, you can combine action with dialogue. So it's sort of humorous one, but she takes a pull on the hookah pipe and says blank. So I tend to like to pair actions sometimes just to sort of set up the line or give a little bit of a breather between the dialogue, and it gives you a chance to sort of absorb what was last said. I was as I'm sort of a student of dialogue, and that "and says" is something that John Sanford does all the time. He was a best-selling thriller author too. And if you know who's speaking, that is, if you have like a two-person dialogue, you can, after you've said, Roger says and Mary says, then you can stop using the he says, she said. You want, it's a fine line because you don't want people to get lost in knowing who's speaking. But to the extent that you can eliminate the tag, it makes it an easier, quicker read, and then the he says, she says doesn't break it up. Yeah, Neil.
It's interesting because to me, this is a trend, the trend of maybe the past, I'll say 20 years or so. You mentioned John Sanford. I just read one of his books, and he was almost always had he said, she said, or whatever, almost never got rid of the attribution or the tag. And I've also read some other books where I have to literally go back and say, okay, that's Sally, that's Bob, that's Sally. Oh, no, that's Bob there. So yeah, the fine line I think is important.
Yeah, if you have to go back, then there's not enough of it.
Right.
But if you can proceed without it, I think it's cleaner. So, I mean, yeah, it's, okay. So how do we test and edit dialogue? By the way, people think Hemingway said this. He didn't. It was Peter DeVries who said this. Write drunk, edit sober. What is he talking about? Well, the writing part is really coming from your subconscious or unconscious, and is the creative flow part. When you edit, you got to be sort of rational and technical about it. So how do you check dialogue? I think one of the most compelling ways to do it is read it aloud. And what you're listening for is does it sound natural and authentic? Number one, would people actually say that? And is it compelling? Does it pull you forward? I was talking about conflict before. If you want the most highly conflicted dialogue I could think of, and this will sound funny that I know this, is the Gilmore Girls. And the reason I know about the Gilmore Girls is because my wife loves that series. So being a good husband, I sat and watched 6 seasons of the Gilmore Girls. And it's constantly the wife fighting, the main character fighting with her mother, fighting with her daughter, the daughter fighting with the boyfriend, and the constant conflict in dialogue. And it's what propels that forward. Now, what I do, because reading aloud, I'm not listening, I'm reading, is I use a program, it's free, called Balabolka. You download it, you cut and paste your text into it, and it plays it back to you. So you can listen to it. Now, the voice is slightly robotic, but I don't care. I'm listening, and I constantly catch actually catch things the proofreader doesn't catch by listening, but I can also say, okay, how's that sound? Does that sound natural? Is it compelling? Apparently there's a way, and I haven't really explored it in Microsoft Word to get it to read the text back to you. A lot of programs have some kind of text-to-speech capability, but listening to it is huge. And I know like writers like Walter Mosley, what he does is he will read it aloud into a tape recorder and then play the tape recorder back to himself to check the dialogue. You can read it to other people and let them listen. In our writers group when we met last time, even though we tend to read offline and then critique online, one of the writers who was writing a play insisted that we play the parts in his play and read it out loud so he can hear it. It was actually kind of amusing, and it was very helpful to him. So what you're checking for is it natural? Is it engaging? Does it move the story forward? I'm going to read you, and this one I don't have an audio on, but it's a little short story I wrote that you can tell me the tenor of it. I'm going to read it to you, and you'll see how hopefully you can have some fun with dialogue. It doesn't have to be so serious. So let me click into that. It's called Word Drunk. Okay. Stop filling my head with your crazy nonsense, Renata cries. By the way, cries, well, that's getting a little descriptive. It's not a he said, she said, but yeah, I think it works. Okay. Sorry, I'm addicted to breathing, and your crazy ex, Brad, almost put an end to that. It's not nonsense. Look at this. Juan lowers his collar, revealing an 8-inch cut across his neck, still oozing. What the hell do you call that? Juan asks. Okay, what did you do to provoke him? Nice. The assumption is that it's my fault, right? Well, I know you and I know him, so odds are, and by the way, drop the attribution here. There's two people talking, and I think it's kind of clear who's saying what. Look, I bumped into him at the Grammar Bar, the one on 63rd. I should have told him to buzz off right then and there, but a free drink is a free drink. Juan drops into the overstuffed easy chair in Renata's 5th floor living room overlooking the park. He just stares out the picture window at the lightly falling snow. The aroma of coffee lingers in the air. And Renata says, raising her eyebrows, we had a few drinks and got into an argument about gerunds. Gerunds? What are you talking about? Like when a verb is acting like a noun, like reading is my favorite pastime. Reading is a gerund there. So what? For this, he slashes your throat? It started to get out of hand when he said, how do you like banging my Renata? Is that a good gerund? Wow, that's why Brad's an X. So naturally, I get pissed off because he pauses for a long 5 seconds. Because I don't think banging is a gerund there. Renata gives Juan a swift kick in his right shin. That's what pissed you off? Juan clutches his shin. Ouch, that really hurt. I was just kidding. Glad you can enjoy a joke at my expense. Renata folds her arms and purses her lips. That's an action added to a he, she said. No kidding now. I think banging really is a gerund in that sense. Renata spins and gives Juan a harder kick in his left shin. How's my boyfriend deserves a thrashing for a gerund? Juan clutches both shins now. I thought you found my sense of humor, or should I say joking, attractive. He says with a grimace, guess not. Anyhow, because he insulted both of us, I grabbed him by the throat and wrestled him to the floor. I tell him strangling you would be worth the consequences. I'm squeezing hard. The bartender says, no fighting in the grammar bar. I finally lost my nerve and let go. Christ, Juan, serving time is not what you want to do. Didn't have enough wasting away in that hellhole in Guadalajara? You're getting this jarring thing pretty good. It's pretty well, she says. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, your Brad pulls out a stiletto, flips open the blade, and does this. Juan points to his throat. He says, killing you may be more enjoyable and a better gerund than screwing Renata. He was about to finish me off when two beefy guys grabbed from behind. I was lucky. They were off-duty cops in the bar discussing the pluperfect when the fight broke out. If it weren't for their fast thinking, I'd be your ex too. Renata lets out a deep breath and her expression softens. Do us both a favor. Stay away from Brad and don't go near that bar anymore. I'd like to keep you in one piece. Mourning is not as much fun as loving. Or stupping, Juan smiles. Renata's warm hand gently touches Juan's neck. Let me get something to put on that. Thanks. Who knew grammar could be so dangerous, Juan says. So there's a cute little dialogue piece. And I really was just playing there with that. I mean, what kinds of dialogue do you hear in that example, or what do you get from that?
The combination of dialogue and the action, you certainly get a sense of their relationship of Juan and Renata, and particularly, I would think, her personality, how she deals with relationships.
Yeah, and his to some extent.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fantastical little thing. But so my point there was just, you don't have to take it dialogue all that seriously either. And I think one of the things that people respond to in my writing, even though it's thrillers and people are getting killed and all kinds of stuff are going on, is that there's some fun and humor mixed in that keeps it going. And so if you have seen some of Aaron Sorkin's stuff, most of them have a serious dramatic theme, but there's a ton of humor mixed in with it. And it's that balance between humor and drama that I think is really effective. So for those of you who are aspiring writers and haven't finished a book yet, one piece of advice that I got from Dennis Lehane as I was working on my first novel, and he's the guy who wrote Mystic River and a bunch of books that were made into movies. The one title escapes me, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Shutter Island.
Shutter Island, yeah. And I saw him at Rutgers a few years ago, and the advice his teacher gave to him was, whatever you do, finish the book. So if you're writing a short story or an essay or whatever, get it done. And if it's not perfect, you can go on to the next one. If you self-publish, you can correct it and change it, but finish the book. And one quote I like, if I waited for perfection, I would never write a word, which is Margaret Atwood. Another author said to me, hey, books are not snowflakes. You should be able to continue or write. I mean, I do multiple rewrites and run-throughs in my books, so I do treat them a bit like snowflakes, but finishing is key. So questions that you might have about dialogue? Thoughts, comments? All right.
So have you ever had someone read dialogue to you and then have you be like, well, that is off? And how do you tell them without being hurtful?
Well, I think it's like any it's a good question. It's like, and we know we deal with this in our writers group, or if you have any kind of similar interaction, it's the art of constructive criticism, which is first you find something you liked about it.
Okay.
And you tell them what you liked, and you don't say, well, I liked it in general, but no, you got to tell them something specific. Like,
Okay.
I like the way you used her tone in answering his question about this, but I think it's kind of clunky and unnatural in a way. And maybe if you did X, giving them some kind of helpful suggestion, it might help improve it. And then some people would say, well, then you close your constructive criticism with something positive. But I'm usually done at that point.
I also think, though, that if you plan to be a writer, you just have to know that nobody is going to love you all the time. And there is always going to be somebody who does not like what you're writing. And there is always going to be someone who is going to be very hypercritical of it. And you cannot take anything anyone says about your writing personally, because if you do, you should just stop because yeah. If you can't take it, just stop.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot of criticism, and you could get plenty of professional criticism too. I mean,
yeah.
But what you're saying, Dee, also reminds me of the fact that, which I think is a real insight, is that every reader brings their own experience to what you have written.
Mm-hmm.
And every reader experiences it in a different way. So, like in that Loverly piece, Renee has a personal experience that perfectly relates to what happens and resonates with her in a way that might be different from someone who has never encountered anyone with Alzheimer's. And in the same way, somebody could bring some baggage to what you're writing that ticks them off when you write it. But I think as writers, you can say don't be sensitive to it, but I read all my reviews.
Oh, I do too. That's how you learn. That's how you learn what's working.
Right. And some of them are helpful. And some of them are, just rants or, just silly stuff. So, I've had very good reviews on my books. They're like on Amazon, they're 4.5 to 4.9, but I had a reviewer say, I read 6 pages of this and the dialogue just is so unnatural. And then she recites a chunk of the dialogue in the review and she stopped reading and gave me 2 stars or something like that. And I thought, oh, you should have give me a chance. But yeah, so you remember that stuff. And what I think I just recently watched the series Hemingway. Did some of you ever see that series?
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's really terrific. But he talks about how somebody who gave him a horrible review, he confronted the guy like years later, and I don't know, did he punch him out or he did something?
Throw a book at him.
He did something very severe. So that's not the way to react to a review. I don't.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Yeah.
Oh, but you had asked about what we're watching. Recommendations. I don't know if you watched The Queen's Gambit
Oh, sure.
or Dead to Me.
I watched The Queen's Gambit, which I really enjoyed.
So did I.
See that? Yeah, that was very good. It was interesting to me on another level, because when I was in high school, I was a serious chess player. I was the president of the chess club. I played in the New Jersey Open, like she did in her early days. Of course, I got Chess Magazine, which they showed,
Mhm.
and I had a chess ranking. I was like 2,400 or something. But yeah, so that was kind of fun. I will tell you my recommendation. I think I've consumed a lot of series and other things. I think the absolute best thriller I've seen in the last many years is on Hulu, and it's called Chance, with Hugh Laurie, who plays House.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's a psychological thriller that just knocked me off my seat. I thought it was so great.
And that's not on BBC.
He was in
No.
another one, wasn't
No,
he?
it's shot in Los Angeles. It's an American-made thing, and it's on Hulu.
But he was also recently in something that was filmed in England where he was like a minister, and there was an illegitimate daughter, and there was something else with him in it that was also a thriller that was really, he was really just a piece of crap kind of guy, but he was a famous politician. And
Yeah, it was a scandal type thing.
yeah.
He was a sleazy guy, and I
Yep.
had a little trouble sticking with that one, but
Well, I'll watch anything with him in it. So
he was a great actor. I loved House. I mean,
Yeah.
House is essentially a Sherlock Holmes rewrite, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Cranky guy with a drug problem who's really good at solving it.
Right.
Chance, I thought, was fantastic.
Okay, that's good
And
to
then
know.
some, I guess, Nordic noir lately. And we've gotten DVDs out from our local library. There's one Swedish series. I think it only has maybe 8 episodes, but it's called The Truth Will Out. And it's based on true story. And it's funny because it does combine the really horrific with the really humorous. It starts out with a detective who was on leave for 3 years because he had a mental breakdown. And when he comes back into the force in Stockholm, they put him in the cold case section because they figure he can't do any harm there. And he has to hire 2 people within the force. And the first person they bring in is a guy who says, well, I'm leaving in a week. I'm going to be a real estate agent. And then the second person they bring in is a woman that was accused of corruption. And the guy who accused her was the first guy. And it's kind of weird from there, but it's all about this serial killer and a really high level corruption in the Swedish police force based on the true story. And it's superbly done. And talk about setting too, setting in the northern parts of Sweden in winter with the snow and the darkness and so on.
And what's it called, Neil?
The Truth Will Out.
Well,
That's
you
what-
must have seen Wallander then. That's
Yeah.
another great
Yeah.
Nordic series.
Yeah, there's a number of very good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be those long winters, I think. That,
And all that darkness, they're always in the dark.
yeah, and somebody asked me the other day, and I didn't have an answer, but maybe you do, is why are the British so great at writing mystery novels? You know, what is that about?
It's the Agatha Christie heritage, right? I mean,
Yeah, we watch all the British mysteries like Endeavour and Inspector Morse and
Midsummer Murders.
you know,
Yeah.
Sherlock and
I think it has to do with the fact that in the country where they live, there's a lot of mystery, you know, anything from, old ruins to, there's a lot of legend and a lot of, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but, England has a lot for so I think
yeah,
that
they have a longer history, so that probably
certainly longer.
is more fruit for good stuff like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Netflix too, I think.
Yep.
And they're also so buttoned up and polite all the time that when they decide they're finally going to let loose, it's pretty horrific.
That's
Yeah,
a good point.
and if you look at, I was talking about conflict earlier. Some of you probably seen the series The Crown.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, and it's all about conflict, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're all interfamily strife with Charles and the father, and with the two sisters, Margaret and the Queen, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's really what drives the story, and intermittent conflict with the Prime Minister and the Queen. And
But I think that the original conflict is right at the beginning when Edward has to step up. He wasn't meant to be king. And I think when you have that initial conflict, it set the stage to have family drama. It was a great series. They did a really good job with it, I thought. Really good job
no,
with it.
they were beautiful. And then, of
Yep.
course, the scenery and all was just
Oh, yeah.
off the hook. But a movie that I loved that's sort of related to that was The King's Speech.
Yeah, that was very
Yeah.
good.
Which is just fantastic and in that vein. But here you've got our protagonist has this issue, that his stuttering and how he overcomes it and how he gets help to overcome it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of conflict in that one too. Neil, you mentioned it's funny how it's almost obligatory that in the detective series, the detective has either got a drinking problem, a drug problem, severe depression, he's probably killed somebody accidentally in the past and been relegated to either be in the cold case area. I'm thinking of Bosch now and the Michael Connolly series, or he's had it. He's either been kicked out or he's retired and he's now a private detective. Mm-hmm. Right. So it kind of goes back to the thing that, in a way, there are no new stories. All the stories have been told. It's just how you do it. Mm-hmm. Your version, your voice, your sense of humor that makes it fresh and entertaining and new.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, no,
I agree. Is there any other? I just didn't know if anyone else had any questions or comments that they wanted to ask. We have Renee and I don't know, who else do we have in here?
Well, we never heard from Paul, if he's there. But just a couple of comments. I send out a newsletter every month with links to my free short stories. I think, Renee, you're on the list.
Right, yes. Charlie, I got something funny to tell you.
Okay.
About one of your books that I Not So Dead on Amazon a while back. But it's said that and I did enjoy, I'm not, it was a little bit hard for me to understand, but it was an interesting twist and everything on thrillers. But the lady who sold it mentioned it was a signed copy. And I love signed memorabilia to begin with. So I thought, well, that's pretty neat. But then it turned out, and if I'm not mistaken, it happened to be something that you signed personally to someone else other than the vendor herself, of all things.
I wonder where she got that from. She probably got it from somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah, must have. And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be a great one to tell Charlie about at some point, have a good laugh over it.
Well, Renee, if you send me your address, I'll send you a real signed copy.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Charlie.
Email me your address. And
neat.
Jean, I will send a couple of copies to the library. You should have it in your library. If you don't.
I'm going to go look it up when we get off here and start with the first one.
Okay, great. Yeah, and speaking of which, either on Amazon or bookshop.org, you can pick up a copy of my books. I also did, after I finished the 3 of them, I put, if you read on Kindle, I put all 3 of them in a bundle, and it's called the Not So Dead Trilogy. Yeah, do get on the list, and you'll see stuff from me, and you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and charleslevin.com.
Cool.
So,
Good afternoon.
hi, Paul. Any
Hey, guys.
questions or
I think
comments?
I think I must owe you guys an apology. I just came on. I thought I was coming in at the beginning, and obviously my timing was bad.
Oh,
Well, Jean did a recording of this, which will be on YouTube. So,
absolutely. Parsippany Library YouTube channel. And when you go onto YouTube, it's the one at the top with the circle that shows our logo. And that's where you want to go to find it.
I will look for it. And again, my apologies.
no,
Thank you.
it's nice to see you. And I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope it was helpful or interesting or provocative for you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, can you stop screen sharing,
Oh,
Charlie?
sure.
That way I can see everyone.
Yeah. Here we
Okay,
all are.
beautiful. There we go. Like I said, if anyone wants to watch this again, just in case you missed anything, Parsippany Library YouTube channel, go right on there. And I wanted to thank Charlie very much for coming and doing this. I thought it was very interesting, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure. I hope to hear from you all. Feel free to email me with any thoughts anytime. I love to talk to my readers and learn more about what you like. And if you do get a chance to watch Chance, let me know what you think.
I will do that.
All right. Take care.
All
Thank you
right.
again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye,
Thanks
Charlie.
very much. Bye-bye now.
Good night.